watching. With the relationship between Grassy Narrows First Nation and Ontario's Ministry of Natural Resources continues to run against the grain. The First Nations leadership has declared an ambition to take over the forest management plan in their traditional lands, but the MNR has its own ideas. John Thompson reports.
Grassy Narrows approached Minister of Natural Resources David Orazietti last week with neighboring Wabascang and Whitefish Bay First Nations, requesting to adopt the forest management plan in the Whiskey Jack Forest. Through traditional means, Grassy Narrows councillor Randy Fobister says the band hoped to transform the Whiskey Jack into a multi-use land management plan.
And forestry is not the only way. That's not the only way. There's a lot of other ways. We can talk about economic development. There's tourism, ecotourism. In other ways, that's a thing we need to all look at, but certainly forestry is not the only way.
That request was flatly rejected. While he's committing to meeting with Grassy prior to April 1st, Orazietti counter-offered engaging 9 First Nations in an enhanced sustainable forestry license, a ministry partnership between municipalities, First Nations, and industry.
We really want to see First Nations directly managing this unit, and we want to see them benefiting because these are resources that are on their traditional lands.
Yeah.
But I want to do that in a way that helps to build the capacity for them to be able to deliver on the work that needs to be done there, and also respecting other First Nations in the area within Treaty 3 that have an interest in this area. And I think there are broader interests as well. There are economic interests, there are community interests, and we want to see everyone succeed.
Chrissy Swain was among the youth who erected the logging blockade at Slant Lake 11 years ago. As the politics circle above her, she says she hasn't backed down over all those years, and she won't be backing down now.
Personally, protecting my children's future and my future grandchildren's future is that I'm still standing in the same position, where, there's not going to be any destruction on this land.
The ministry points out that only 1,000 hectares, or 0.001% of the units, are targeted for logging. But the talk in Grassy Narrows is how only 2.5% of that wood is going to First Nations development in a community where 4 out of every 5 people are unemployed. Even as the case over whether Ontario has the right to plan in the Whiskey Jack Forest winds its way through the Supreme Court, the provincial logging plan is set to begin this spring. John Thompson, TBT News.
The Constitution of the Anishinaabe people in Treaty 3 has survived for centuries through conversation. Funding from the province will now entrench the laws of those 28 First Nations by creating the Constitution's first written version. Minister of Aboriginal Affairs David Zimmer was in Dawes First Nation this past week for annual meetings with each community in the Treaty 3 territory. He announced the province is renewing the New Relationship Fund, a capacity-building envelope of $210,000 for the Constitution Project. The fund helped create a commemorative book for the 140th observance of the treaty last summer. Treaty 3 Grand Chief Warren White says the project will draw together past chiefs.
People that understand the Constitution in terms of the traditions, culture, and our laws that have been there from time immemorial, and putting it on paper, because this time of decades and years is paper has always been understood, and reluctantly we want to put it on paper so everybody understands our Constitution.
Minister Zimmer refused to speak with the media about the project. While opposition parties were quick to criticize a Ring of Fire announcement in Thunder Bay on Friday, the province says it's taking another step towards development in the mineral-rich region. Mining Minister Michael Gravel says the firm Deloitte LLP has been brought on to set clear paths and timelines for decision-making. As Dennis Ward reports, one mining company says that their path should be the clear choice.
Mining Minister Michael Gravel says the province has hired Deloitte LLP to help establish the Ring of Fire Development Corporation. The firm will act as a neutral, third-party resource for potential partners, including First Nations, the provincial and federal government, and the mining industry. Among Deloitte's tasks will be preparing a report on the various infrastructure proposals.
There are issues related to governance, legally setting up the corporation, the role of the potential partners, their level of investment in the corporation. Those are important pieces. So that process is underway as we speak. And at the same time, the report is being prepared as well. So I'm hoping it all comes together fairly soon.
Currently, 3 transportation routes have been proposed. KWG Resources favors a rail line over a road into the development, but benefits for First Nations could be limited. Cliffs Natural Resources was working with a north-south road from the Ring of Fire to Greenstone, but they've halted operations indefinitely. The other option is Norront's east-west route down to Pickle Lake. Vice President of Aboriginal Affairs Glenn Nolan says Norront has already completed a tremendous amount of work and feels this proposal is the best case.
We're the only company actually that has anything of substance. We've got our feasibility done. We've submitted our EA, as you pointed out. I think that they have to look at ours as the primary option right now.
Nolan feels the hiring of Deloitte is a good idea and will bring some clarity and direction to the process. But opposition parties jumped on the announcement. The NDP says consultants will benefit while mining industries sit on the sidelines and First Nations suffer. The PCs say the Wynne government is misleading people with announcements of any progress in the Ring of Fire. Dennis Ward, TVT News.
A Thursday fire on the Mishkegowgaming First Nation claimed the lives of 4 people. This according to a release from Assembly of First Nations National Chief Sean Atleo, which extended condolences to the community. The fire that completely destroyed the home in the community on Highway 599 broke out around 3 in the morning. Anishinaabe police have not yet been able to officially confirm the deaths, however, as the investigation remains in the hands of the Ontario Fire Marshal. Progressive Conservative candidate Tamara Johnson says everyone has a right to share their opinion, even if some people don't like it. The candidate for Thunder Bay Superior North in the next provincial election created some strong reaction to posts she made to Facebook this week. Johnson, a small business owner herself, says First Nation gas bars and other businesses enjoy what she calls an unfair advantage. As Dennis Ward reports, a former chief of the Fort William First Nation thinks Johnson needs to educate herself.
They look at unfair advantage. Well, where do you think we've been for 150 plus years?
Northern Superior Regional Grand Chief Peter Collins believes PC candidate Tamara Johnson needs to educate herself about treaties and unfair advantages. He likens people coming to Fort William First Nation for cheaper gas and cigarettes to shoppers going to Walmart or somewhere else with lower prices. But Johnson stands by the unfair advantage comment.
Well, you betcha. I mean, gas and smokes are cheaper, so. But I don't blame anybody for going there, and I am pro small business, large business, any business, a reserve business, a city business. So I encourage anyone to go wherever if they can get the best price. But it does make it unfair for somebody who can't have the same advantages.
Her comments were sparked in part by comments made by Collins at a recent meeting on the James Street Swing Bridge. Collins said it was time to consider a blockade of CN rail traffic. Johnson says blockades are illegal and the laws need to be enforced.
Everything that I said was true, and I think somebody needs to say it. And I speak the truth, and I'm not afraid to get my voice out there, and what we need is people with guts.
Collins admits a blockade is not always the answer, but threatening one can get a message across.
Has anybody been charged in the past? Yes, there's been some charged. Have they stuck? I haven't seen the outcome of a lot of them, but you know, I've been in rallies, I've been at the lobby, and it takes whatever it takes to get people to open their eyes and ears again. I've been at the where we charged into the House of Commons that we weren't charged. Was it illegal? Quite possibly.
Collins calls Johnson's comments disheartening, but the PC candidate says she's just sharing her opinion and believes there are much more important issues to talk about. Dennis Ward, TVT News.
Over 100 NDP supporters came together last weekend to choose the candidate that will lead the Thunder Bay Atikokan riding in the next provincial election. A nomination meeting took place at the Lakehead Labour Centre. 2 candidates were vying to represent the NDP, Merrick Kazoris and Matt Richardson. It's the second time the two have squared off in a nomination race, and again, Kazoris was the victor. is something she's thrilled about.
I'm overwhelmed and humbled by the support that I received, in particular the people that I see here today from a variety of different walks of life, who are here because they're confident that this party can win, confidence in the NDP, confidence in the leader, and confidence in myself.
Party leader Andrea Horvath was also in town to take part in the nomination meeting. She says if people across Ontario want a spring provincial election, she'll do her part to make it happen.
I don't know when the next election's coming. We all know that there is a budget cycle, and it takes a confidence motion for the government to fall. Confidence motions are budgets and throne speeches, and so we know that budget is on its way.
Kazoris joins City Councillor Andrew Fold, who is the NDP's nominee in the Thunder Bay Superior North riding. First Nations across the Northwest are penning a federal pledge of nearly $2 billion to reform on-reserve education. The money for schools is tied to the new First Nations Education Act. Rochelle Sufi has that story.
The First Nation Education Act will require reserve school teachers to obtain provincial certification and will establish education standards in First Nations. Prime Minister Stephen Harper called it a great day for Canada, for First Nations communities, and the next generation. First Nations disagree. Ontario Regional Chief Stan Bairdy committed to continue to work with the federal government as he called for the wealth of natural resources to be reflected in educating people who live on the land.
I guess what's most upsetting overall is that a lot of the wealth creation is adjacent to our communities, anywhere in Ontario, especially in the far north, and yet the wealth is not being shared with us.
Anishinaabe Aski Nation Grand Chief Harvey Yesno says not only is the financial commitment not enough to fix the graduation rates in the far north, that they are amongst the lowest in Canada. But there's political uncertainty over the time the funds will roll out.
The funding actually doesn't kick in until next fiscal year, the first portions of it. And the big one of $1.252 billion doesn't actually kick in until 16-17, which is after the election, and including the escalator. Right now we're at 2% cap for education funding.
When Treaty 3 was signed in 1873, the right to education was a unique component to the agreement. Treaty 3 Grand Council launched a lawsuit in 2011 over the hundreds of dollars in disparity between on and off reserve school funding. Treaty 3 Grand Chief Warren White says Grand Council is reviewing the act, but he insists consultation and accommodation must take place for all treaty territories.
I've said many times, and I've heard the National Chief many times, that that is the only way it's going to work, is a nation-to-nation process and treaty by treaty.
Despite the opposition, Parliament intends to have the First Nation Education Act in place for September of this year. Rochelle Sufi, TBT News.
Ontario Regional Chief Stan Bairdy says the new federal budget is an attack on First Nations business. The Harper government is planning to spend more than $91 million over the next 5 years to help police monitor contraband tobacco trafficking activities. The RCMP will receive new radar, sonar, and ground sensor devices and long-range video cameras in high-risk areas. Bairdy says he's concerned with police going after the First Nations tobacco industry.
As soon as RCMP enforcement agency is involved, it implies that it is somehow illegal. It is against legislation. It is against the law to do that. But it isn't, because we never gave up the right to govern ourselves. It is our right. It's within our jurisdiction to generate our own resource revenue, our revenues to begin to address and meet our needs.
Bairdy says Canada needs to focus more on the quality of life on its First Nations, and he says more funding is needed for basic essentials like housing, water, and other infrastructure in their communities. Well, Kenora is pushing for the return of the spring bear hunt. That story and more when Northwest Newsweek returns. Welcome back. Well, businesses in Kenora have identified reinstating the spring bear hunt as their top priority. Kenora is not among areas selected for a pilot project the province announced for next spring, but as John Thompson reports, the tourist town's criticism runs much deeper.
The Kenora District Chamber of Commerce is lending its voice to the chorus the Northwest has been singing for years: bring back the spring bear hunt. The Chamber held its annual general meeting on Wednesday, vowing to take the issue to the Northwestern Ontario Associated Chambers of Commerce meetings in April. The bear hunt was canceled in 1999, and the 5 largest cities in northern Ontario, including Thunder Bay, have been granted a resident hunt for the spring of 2014. Nearly 500 kilometers away, Kenora Chamber President Wes Romanuk claims businesses are losing tens of millions of dollars each year in tourism revenues from the canceled hunt, and insists Kenora depends on destination travelers to keep its economy afloat.
Money that's here is already here. I mean, money we bring in from the south or Manitoba or neighboring provinces is it's really important to us, and it's part of what drives us, especially in the springtime when things are, kind of still wound down after winter.
Jerry Carriou represents the outfitters across Sunset Country at the western edge of Ontario. Although it will be illegal to kill sows and cubs under the provincial plan, he argues wildlife will be negatively impacted with no economic benefit.
It's going to result in some inexperienced hunters, I believe, out in the bush in areas they don't know. I think they don't know how to recognize sows with cubs as they would if they had gone through an outfitter. The outfitter would be there to assist in that process. They could help the ministry collect data on the hunt. So I think there may be even an increase in potentially in sows with cubs taken by accident under the current proposal.
The spokesperson for the Kenora OPP says police receive a fair amount of problem bear calls, particularly in the fall and spring. Outfitters point out the nuisance bear phenomenon isn't restricted to city centers and say restricting the program to larger municipalities amounts to more of a call than a hunt. John Thompson, TBT News.
There may be changes coming to the scope of the proposed Platinum Group metals mine in Marathon. Stillwater Canada recently suspended the panel review team consultations that were to begin on February 20th in Marathon and nearby First Nations. The move was required to process questions that would have arisen from what the company calls a re-evaluation of the size of the project. Marathon Mayor Rick Dumas says the town will meet with the company in March. Stillwater President Clark Gilbert will not say whether the company hopes to widen or narrow the mine's output, but he does stress that shareholders Stillwater Mining and Mitsubishi Corporation see the site as one of their strategic assets.
In the public hearings, that we're putting forward the best available project. So whether that's the one that we've got right now in hand or some variation of that one, that's what we're trying to identify.
Under Stillwater's current scope, the proposed mine would create 350 full-time jobs in the Marathon area. On a Cisco shareholders vote that was to have taken place next week over a $2.6 billion hostile takeover bid to Gold Corp has been put on hold. Cisco has filed a lawsuit alleging Gold Corp acted in bad faith by violating a confidentiality agreement between two companies. A Quebec Superior Court will hear arguments on March 3rd. Cisco continues to press on with its Hammond Reef gold project near Atikokan, holding an open house in the community and consultations with area First Nations regarding the project's environmental assessment. Atikokan Mayor Dennis Brown says no matter who wins between Cisco and Gold Corp, Atikokan will be the winner.
Relationship right now with Cisco, and if they want to stay on, we'd sure welcome that, and we'll do whatever we can to help move forward, because this is a very important project for the community of Atikokan. But if the other company buys it, Gold Corp, I've already talked to one of the vice presidents, and he's assured me that they'll keep the commitments that Cisco has. So, it seems like either way we'll be okay.
An international geographical pilot project was announced this week. Details coming up after the break. Welcome back. Well, the Heart of the Continent Partnership unveiled its collaboration with National Geographic in Thunder Bay on Friday. The International Geotourism Project is aimed at promoting visitation to northwestern Ontario and northeastern Minnesota as a world-class destination for natural, cultural, and historic significance. Mike Albanese reports.
There are magical experiences, there are magical stories that need to be told.
That was Paul Pepe, manager of tourism for Thunder Bay, and he is excited about a new partnership with the world-renowned National Geographic Society to build a geotourism website devoted to this area.
What it does is it starts to map all of our natural assets, it starts to map our cultural assets in the region, and what it does is it puts together a touring region that now in the alignment with National Geographic Society with this particular project really gives us a greater reach into the marketplace and gives us a good brand alignment with that National Geographic name.
Geotourism is defined as tourism that sustains or enhances the geographical character of a place, its environment, culture, aesthetics, heritage, and the well-being of its residents. Ontario and Minnesota teamed up with National Geographic and the Bi-National Initiative to help bring awareness to the respective areas of North America. The goal is to build a geotourism website that will bring more people from around the world to our region.
It's good for the community, it gets more people to the region, and it works to make that border invisible between Minnesota and Ontario, and that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to get more people to the region, we're trying to make the pie bigger, and get more people exploring, and get more people exploring the parks and protected areas, but getting them to use the urban centers and the small communities as hubs, and that's when it starts to benefit our cultural attractions, it starts to benefit our culinary attractions, and our accommodation partners as well.
The project has been in the works for the last 7 years. The contract was finally signed a week ago, and work is starting right away. St. Louis County Commissioner Frank Jewell said there is a lot to be done within the website, but with the National Geographic's interest, all systems are a go.
With the reach of National Geographic, we'll reach across the world and really tell people about what National Geographic thinks is one of the unheralded jewels in the world.
If all goes according to plan, the website will be up and running with all of the attractions and hotspots by November of this year or February of 2015. Mike Albanese, TBT News.
Well, thank you for watching. We'll see you again next week.